In 1928, an American company built a car that made Rolls-Royce look old-fashioned. It had 265 horsepower at a time when its closest rival made about 100. It could touch 116 miles an hour when most cars on the road struggled to reach 60. It cost more than a house, a nice house. Sometimes it cost more than 10 of them. Movie stars didn't just buy one. They fought over who got the wildest version. And then, 9 years later, it was gone. The company was dead. The name was buried in bankruptcy paperwork, and most people forgot it ever existed, except for one detail. The ultimate version of this car would sell, decades later, for $22 million. That is still the most anyone has ever paid for an American automobile, full stop. So how does a car become the best in the world, beat the most famous luxury brand on earth, and then disappear almost overnight? Let me show you. To understand the car, you have to understand the man who ordered it built. And he wasn't a Duesenberg. Fred and Augie Duesenberg were brothers, and they were engineers before they were anything else. They built race cars, fast ones. By the mid-1920s, the Duesenberg name stood for ambition, not sales numbers, because they never really sold many cars. Then a businessman named Eret Laban Cord walked in. Cord took control of the Auburn Car Company in the mid-20s, turned it around, and started buying up everything around it. He bought Duesenberg. He owned an engine builder called Lycoming. He stacked them all into one empire, and inside that empire, every piece had a job. Auburn was the industrial muscle. Lycoming built the engines, and Duesenberg sat at the very top as the crown jewel. The thing that proved the whole operation was serious. Cord gave Fred Duesenberg one instruction, and it was close to insane. Don't build a good car. Build the best car in the world. Beat Rolls-Royce. Beat Hispano-Suiza. Spend whatever it takes. Most companies build a flagship to make money. Cord built the Duesenberg to make a point. America could out-engineer Europe at its own game. The car arrived on the 1st of December 1928 at the New York Automobile Salon. And arrived is the right word, because it showed up like an event. Here's how new it was. At that show, exactly one finished example existed. One car. Chassis number J101. Everything else was promise. The press lost their minds anyway. The New Yorker wrote about its bold curves and the strange, daring Louvre work along the hood. The advertising didn't even bother pretending it was about transport. She drives a Duesenberg, the world's finest motor car. They weren't selling a car. They were selling a social rank you could park in your driveway. Now hold that date in your head, December 1928. Because 10 months later, in October 1929, the stock market crashed. Duesenberg had just built the most expensive thing a rich American could buy and pointed it directly at the one group of people who were about to lose everything. But for one short window, before the floor fell out, the Model J got to do exactly what Cord promised it would. It got to humiliate the competition. So let's talk about what was actually under that hood. The engine was a 420 cubic inch straight 8, dual overhead cams, 4 valves per cylinder. If that sounds like racing technology, that's because it was. Almost nobody put that kind of engineering in a luxury car. It made 265 horsepower. I keep saying that number because in 1928, it's almost cartoonish. The car would do around 116 miles an hour flat out. And here's the part that really lands. It could do close to 90 miles an hour in second gear, not top gear. Second, most cars of the era couldn't reach 90 at all, in any gear, going downhill with a tailwind. It stopped as hard as it ran, too. Four-wheel hydraulic brakes, when a lot of expensive cars were still slowing down with cables and rods. And the obsession went deeper than speed. The chassis had an automatic lubrication system that oiled itself as you drove. The dashboard had warning lights telling you when to change the oil and check the battery. This is 1928. People had Model Ts with hand cranks, and Duesenberg owners had service reminder lights. Then there's my favorite detail. Every single chassis was driven 500 miles hard around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway before the factory would let anyone put a body on it. Think about that. No other luxury car on earth was tested like a race car. This thing wasn't built to look good sitting still. It was built to embarrass whatever pulled up next to it. Which brings us to the fight everyone wants to talk about. Was the Duesenberg really better than a Rolls-Royce? Back then, Rolls-Royce was the word. If you wanted to say something was the best, you said it was the Rolls-Royce of whatever. The brand stood for silence, dignity, and quiet, perfect craftsmanship. You didn't roar past people in a Rolls, you glided. So here's the comparison. The Rolls-Royce Phantom 2, the big luxury flagship, made about 120 horsepower. The Duesenberg made 265. It beat its nearest rival by more than 100 horsepower. That's not winning. That's a different category. But I want to be honest with you, because horsepower isn't the whole story. There are really two kinds of luxury here. One is performance, power, speed, the thrill of the thing. Duesenberg owned that completely. Nobody was close. The other is refinement, the hush, the sense of effortless aristocratic calm. And on that, Rolls-Royce was still king. A Duesenberg was louder, wilder, more of an event. A Rolls was quieter, smoother, more serene. There were other players too. Isata Fraschini and Hispano Suiza from Europe, beautiful, prestigious cars. But neither one matched the Duesenberg's raw power either. 5. So was it more luxurious than a Rolls-Royce? Here's the cleanest answer I can give you. Rolls-Royce won the contest of restraint. Duesenberg won the contest of impact. And in 1929 America, impact was what people were willing to pay a fortune for. Speaking of the fortune, let's talk about what one of these actually cost, because the number is genuinely hard to believe. Here's something most people don't realize. You couldn't just walk in and buy a finished Duesenberg. You bought a chassis, the rolling frame, the engine, the mechanical parts, and then you took that chassis to a coach builder and had them hand-build a body to your taste. It was like buying a foundation and then hiring an architect. And the list of architects was the best in the world. Murphy out in California, who became the most popular because their designs were clean and sporting. LeBaron, Rolston, Durham, Willoughby on the East Coast. Buick's own La Grande operation. And in Europe, houses like Sauchik that built rolling sculpture. 5. So how much did this cost? The bare chassis, no body, started at $8,500. Later it went up to $9,500. In today's money, that's somewhere around $165,000 to $240,000. And again, that's before you have anything you can actually sit in. A finished car ran $13,000 to $25,000. To put that in perspective, that was several times what an entire upper-middle-class family earned in a year. You weren't buying a car. You were spending a small fortune to commission one, and the interiors got completely unhinged. One sedan built by Judkins had a jewel case, an umbrella tray, and a hidden makeup compartment that unfolded into a full dressing table with a mirror, fitted out by Elizabeth Arden, the cosmetics company. That's not a car with nice options. That's mobile interior architecture for people who could buy literally anything and wanted everyone on the street to know it. As the crash sank in, the old East Coast money started drying up. But the car found a new home, and it was Hollywood. The owner list reads like a movie poster. 5. Greta Garbo, Clark Gable, Mae West, Tom Mick. If you were a star and you wanted everyone to know it, you drove a Duesenberg. And in 1932, Duesenberg doubled down. They bolted a supercharger onto the engine and created the SJ. Now you had around 320 horsepower and a top speed near 130 miles an hour. 5. More power, more noise, more show. But 1932 also delivered the first real blow. Fred Duesberg, the engineering genius behind the whole thing, died. The company lost its greatest mind at the exact moment it needed someone to figure out how to survive a collapsing economy. And notice what was quietly happening. The buyers had shifted from old money industrialists to movie stars. That sounds glamorous, but it was actually a warning sign. The original market, the one the car was designed for, was already gone. The cars kept getting faster and wilder. But underneath all that chrome, the ground was giving way, and the thing pulling it down was much bigger than one car company. So why did it really die? The biggest reason wasn't the car at all. It was the country. Between 1929 and 1933, the American economy didn't just dip. It fell off a cliff. Real economic output dropped by roughly 29%. Unemployment climbed to nearly 25%. 5. 1 in 4 people out of work. Banks failed all over the country and took people's savings with them. Now think about who bought a Duesenberg. The richest people in America. And the Depression hit them twice. First, a lot of that wealth simply evaporated. And second, even the people who still had money suddenly didn't want to be seen flaunting it. Driving the most extravagant car in the world past breadlines was a bad look. The way Duesenberg built cars made it even worse. Remember, they sold a chassis first, then waited months for an outside coach builder to finish it. That's wonderful for exclusivity. It's terrible for survival. It meant long delays, money tied up, and a final price that kept climbing in an economy where prices everywhere else were falling. Most of the engines and chassis were actually built early, around 1929 and 1930, then bodied and sold slowly over the following years as demand shrank. So the company was basically sitting on inventory, feeding it into a market that was disappearing. The Model J wasn't badly built, it was badly timed. It was the perfect car for a world that stopped existing the moment it went on sale. But here's the part that finished it off. The car didn't die alone. It went down with Ford's entire empire. By 1937, the cracks were everywhere. Auburn, the company at the center of the whole operation, posted a loss of over $5 million. The wider Ford Corporation was barely scraping a profit next to that. Then Ford himself got into serious trouble. He agreed to a federal court order connected to the way his own company's stock had been traded, tied to anti-manipulation rules. And in the same stretch, he sold off his entire stake and walked. When he left, the new owners said it plainly. This was the end of the Ford name in the business. Auburn, Ford, and Duesenberg all collapsed together in 1937. A few final cars got cobbled together from leftover parts as late as 1940, and then it was over. So the greatest car in America didn't die because of a flaw under the hood. It died because the man in the empire holding it up walked away, and the whole thing came down at once. And that should have been the end. A magnificent car, a footnote forgotten. Except that's not what happened at all. Here's the twist that makes this story strange. In total, from 1928 to 1937, Duesenberg built just 481 of these cars. 445 standard Model JS and 36 of the supercharged SJs. That's it, a tiny number. Now here's the astonishing part. Of those 481 cars, somewhere around 375 to 378 still exist today. For a car that's roughly a century old, built in tiny numbers by a company that went bankrupt, that survival rate is almost unheard of. Cars from that era usually got scrapped, crashed, or rusted into nothing. Duesenberg's got saved. They became their own preservation culture, specialist shops that do nothing but restore them. Strict authenticity certification. Cars winning the top concours awards at places like Pebble Beach. And the auction numbers tell the story. A standard Model J convertible by Murphy sold for $875 million. A rarer Phaeton by Walker and LeGrande went for $4 million. But those are the ordinary ones. There's one car that sits in a class no other American automobile has ever reached. The ultimate Duesenberg was the SSJ, the most extreme version they ever made, with a short wheelbase and even more power. They built exactly two, one for Gary Cooper and one for Clark Gable. Two of the biggest movie stars on the planet, each with a car nobody else could have. In 2018, the auction house Gooding & Company sold Gary Cooper's 1935 SSJ. The hammer came down at $22 million. That made it the most valuable American car ever sold at auction. It still holds that record. Now go back to where we started. A bare Duesenberg chassis once cost $80,500. The greatest version of the same car now sells for $22 million. And that finally settles the old argument. Rolls-Royce built the most dignified car of the era. That's true, and it always was. But Duesenberg built the most desired one. Because when the market got the chance, decades later, to put a real price on these cars, it answered the question with the biggest number it could write. The car the Depression killed became the most valuable American automobile in history. The world couldn't afford it in 1929. Now it can't afford to be without it. So the Duesenberg Model J didn't disappear because it was a bad car. It disappeared because it was too good for its moment. It outpowered Rolls-Royce. It outdazzled Europe. It outpriced almost everyone alive. And then the economy that could pay for it simply ceased to exist. It's the clearest proof in car history of a hard, simple truth. You can build the best car in the world, and the world can still decide it can't keep you. So I'll leave it with you. If money were no object and it's 1929, which one are you taking home? The Duesenberg or the Rolls? Tell me in the comments.